Gap on the left vacated by Labour. That's the pitch from the Green Party as they prepare to launch their election manifesto. Their leader, Caroline Lucas, says her party intends to shake off its single-issue image by emphasising policies of social justice and economy. And Caroline Lucas, who is standing as a candidate in this election, is with me now. Welcome to you indeed. I mean, I have to say, looking through your policies, 50 pence top rate of tax at £100,000, no national insurance ceiling, raising of the minimum wage, £170 basic pension. I mean, you could be called the Reds rather than the Greens.
We've always had policies about social justice as well as environmental justice. I think that at this election they're coming more to the fore, really, because, as you said, there's such a space, or as I said, and you quoted, there's such a space, really, on the electoral spectrum now where nobody is really standing up for those core values of fairness. So we're very upfront about it. And in spite of all of the other party slogans talking about fairness, I think this is really the moment to really reform the tax system.
Awful lot of talk about growth, economic growth. Do you, as Greens, believe in economic growth?
We believe we need to get the economy going. The way we question is whether or not it's possible on a finite planet to go on creating more and more.
Well, exactly. So you're more about fair distribution of what's there, rather than...
We want to have fair distribution of what's there, and what we want to do as well, of course, is to make sure that in the process of production and consumption, we do it in the most efficient way possible.
And does that necessitate, do you think, lower living standards for people?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think what it does mean is a better quality of life. And I'd really cite lots of evidence out there that suggests that more equal societies are actually societies that have much better outcomes when it comes to health, education, less crime, less violence. And I think that if you look at a society... Most of the more equal
societies that are cited are actually much smaller than our society, have much less variety.
I don't see why that's
Scandinavian ones, for example.
Yes, but I don't see why that is an argument against having
more...
more...
Because there's more homogeneity within the society already.
Well, you can argue about cause and effect, but I'd argue that if we didn't have one of the most unequal societies in Europe, if we didn't have a situation where the top 10% have 100 times the wealth of the bottom 10%, we might find a bit more cohesiveness in our society.
So would you have basically a cap on top earnings?
We would look at that. What we want is a high pay commission. There's quite a lot of momentum now growing around the idea of a high pay commission, because people, I think, are genuinely shocked about people taking home, millions, having 15 million as a golden handshake at other times when people have got hardly anything to live on and are really struggling. So, I think there's a real appetite, and to use this opportunity to seriously look again at our whole tax system, the whole way in which we try to shift, I hope, towards a fairer society.
Presumably you welcome the higher price of petrol.
I don't welcome it in the sense that I recognise that it causes...
It's going to mean people can afford less.
Well, what we would do would be to put in place, first of all, much better public transport, more affordable public transport. Our policies in the manifesto that will be launched on Thursday will talk very much about making it easier for people to shift away from dependence on private car use.
Yeah.
So,
but is it a good thing that we have very high energy taxes?
It's an inevitable thing, I think, given where we are with climate change, the need to get our emissions down. But what I'm saying is that I won't welcome it in the sense that I recognise that because the government's done nothing really very much to support our public transport system, then it's going to create hardship for some people.
I mean, that is something which less well-off people feel very strongly and immediately when the price of fuel is high, which is sort of going against your redistributive ideas.
It depends. When you look at our manifesto on Thursday, which is a fully costed manifesto, you'll see that the people on lower incomes are absolutely better off under our manifesto, even with higher petrol prices. It's about where you put the tax burden. And because we're going to be doing things like looking at pensions, the £170 pension pledge that you described today, because we think it's, again, a scandal that pensioners in our society are some of the poorest paid in the whole of Europe, that they are struggling. 1 in 4 pensioners in poverty. That's not right.
But people, on balance, there's a green element of what you believe in is people ought to be paying more for their energy. Yeah?
Yes, and less on other things. I mean, it's about redistributing the tax burden. It is not about overall increasing solely on the environmental side.
Now, a lot of debate in the environmental community about nuclear power, whether there should be a new generation or there shouldn't be. Your position on that?
We're very clear that we don't need nuclear power, that it's a diversion, that we can meet our energy needs and get our emissions down much more quickly, much more cost effectively through a massive investment in energy efficiency, renewable energies. Decentralised energy is going to be a key part of this as well.
I mean, I haven't seen any projections by anybody which suggests credibly over the next few decades that by using renewables we could actually fill that energy gap.
But if you listen to what I said, I didn't just say renewables, I was talking about energy efficiency, and there's government's own figures suggest we could save 40% of the energy we use today through existing energy efficiency measures alone. I talked about decentralised energy as well.
That will cost how much?
Can I just finish the point? Because I wanted to say the other point you raised about no one ever talking about how this model would work. The Sustainable Development Commission, the government's own advisory body, has absolutely put together a plan without using nuclear whereby you could meet our energy needs and get our emissions down.
And the cost of that would be what?
The cost of that would be a lot less than the cost of nuclear power. Nuclear power is massively expensive. We still don't pay the full costs because we don't actually add in the costs of decommissioning. So it seems to me that, there is a really positive agenda here, which would be about creating jobs, because renewable energies, energy efficiency are far more labour-intensive than the fossil fuels they replace, much more labour-intensive than nuclear. There's a real potential win-win out there that other politicians are
now, under the proportional system of the European elections, you've got seats in the European Parliament. This time round, feeling that you might possibly end up with one MP out of 650. What is the point?
The point is about making a start, getting the foot in the door, because all of the experience we have is that once you get through that credibility barrier, once you get the first Greens elected, more Greens follow them. I was a county councillor in Oxfordshire back in '93. There are now many Greens on the city council, the county council, deputy mayor, once you get that foot in the door. And, I was interested to notice that the amount of time between the first Labour MPs and the first Labour government was, well, maybe around 24 years. I hope we don't have to wait that long, but it's a foot in the door and it shows that we're on the way.
And if it comes to a hung parliament, where obviously every vote, every seat counts, what would be your strategy? I mean, would you, for example, if David Cameron or the Labour Party were one seat short, would you be prepared to join their governments?
I can't really see the Greens joining David Cameron, I have to say. And I think what we would do is to basically follow the kind of experience we've had in the Scottish Parliament, where we've had the balance of power, London Assembly. What we would do is look at things on a case-by-case basis.
So your preference is for Labour?
Well, no, we're not going to be propping up an unpopular Labour government, but what we will be doing, or would be doing, would be judging on a case-by-case basis. But as we've just been describing, the direction of travel clearly is very much on that side of the spectrum.
And there was a time where we used to see Liberal Democrat Green alliances to a certain extent electorally. What's happened to that?
I'm not quite sure where that ever was particularly. I mean, I think that we see very clearly that the other three parties are more or less on one side, and we've got a very different set of priorities, a very different way of doing things. All of those three, for example, are talking about these massive spending cuts. Even Nick Clegg talking about savage cuts and sharpening his knife. We are actually the only ones saying right now, in the middle of a recession.
There's no need for cuts, you think?
Well, we think that there are two ways of addressing the deficit. One is by making cuts. The other is by reforming our tax system. We think there ought to be an awful lot more discussion about reforming the tax system. So, of course, there are going to be cuts. We want to have cuts of Trident, ID cards, road building. We've got a nice long list of what we want to see.
So there's this balance, 80-20 or 75-25 or whatever, between spending cuts and tax increases. Sounds like you're saying it ought to be, I don't know, 80-20 tax rises versus cuts.
I don't want to put figures on it, but in that direction. That is certainly the direction. Absolutely. We think that this is a real opportunity to address
really
the facts.
massive tax increases we're
for
talking about.
those who can afford it on the very highest income.
If you look at the costing figures already, 50 pence on those above 100 grand is not going to pay for 80%.
No, it isn't, which is why we've also got lifting of the cap on national insurance, why we've also got changes to corporation tax, capital gains tax. When you see on Thursday...
who wouldn't pay more income tax? At what level under the Green?
We want to introduce the 10p percentage. We want to have the 22p
So everybody
tax
above average would pay more?
Everybody above 100,000 would certainly pay more. That's not average.
No, but that wouldn't do it. You've accepted that wouldn't do it. So it'd be everybody above average, would it?
Slightly more, and everybody below average would be paying a lot less. You'll see on Thursday. We're going to have our costed manifesto on Thursday.
We'll look forward to that, Caroline Lucas.
Thank
you very much indeed. This is Sky News. On our website, skynews.com, you can keep up with all the latest political gossip at the Bolton & Co blog. And coming up, Lord Owen on